I'd now like to introduce Tim O'Leary. Tim is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Telstra and is driving the company's holistic approach to sustainability, and in particular, I think brings us the very important focus of inclusiveness. Telstra's been a long-standing partner of the Foundation's Australia program, and in particular is working with us on the opportunities available to Australia in an increasing digital age, and that's an area that we're currently exploring with Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Adi. Thank you for the opportunity to address this topic. I'm going to sort of echo some of Ahmed's themes, not because I used to work with Ahmed at the National Australia Bank, but because these themes I think are particularly important. The idea of connecting, the idea of connection, particularly within the context of the digital economy. These days it seems it's only the brave and the foolhardy that are inclined to make predictions as to the future shape of the digital economy. Changes both dynamic and disruptive are now par for the course, and things move incredibly quickly. Today, for many of us, it's hard to imagine life before the iPad, and yet it is only 2 years and 1 month since this remarkable little device changed the way we work and play. So let me try and sketch out very briefly a couple of the trends in this area. Firstly, we are experiencing the wholesale digitisation of content. Everything is now digital. Books, photos, maps, X-rays, even the Vatican is digital. 5 exabytes of data are created every 48 hours. What's an exabyte, I hear you asking? It's a billion bytes. And recently I read somewhere that at 5 exabytes, the amount of data that is created every 48 hours, is estimated to be about equal to all the words ever uttered in humankind. Secondly, we have well and truly become a connected and networked global society. The number of connections on the network grows exponentially in what would seem to be our insatiable desire to communicate. Every day, 300 billion emails, 20 billion SMS messages, 7 billion calls. Tweets have increased tenfold in the last 3 years, from 27 million to 290 million today. More video is uploaded on YouTube every fortnight than the 3 American TV networks created in the last 60 years. And Ahmed has also mentioned the incredible dynamic of social media. Thirdly, the personalised device revolution shows no sign of abating. Last year's mobile data traffic was 8 times the size of the entire internet in 2000. And by the end of this year, the number of mobile connected devices will exceed the number of people on the earth. There are other trends we could also identify. Faster and faster networks, the explosion of applications, the centrality of the internet search engine, and so on. This is the connected world we live in today. But the key point of my remarks is not to simply sketch the remarkable dynamism in the information and communication technology space. It is to highlight the importance of all Australians, and for that matter, all people in our region, having access to the everyday social and economic benefits that come with being connected, and that for most of us, we simply take for granted. The ability for people to engage in the digital economy is often termed digital citizenship or digital inclusion. And as social and economic activity increasingly moves online, the consequences of digital exclusion become more and more profound. Notwithstanding recent advances, for one reason and another, a significant number of people in our region are digitally excluded. The most recent ABS numbers report that 79% of Australians have access to the internet at home. But that's 21% of Australians who don't have access to the internet at home, some 2.6 million Australians. Further, for people with a reported disability, 62% of people only had access to internet at the home and only 54% for people over 60. In Central Australia, Indigenous households are 76% less likely to have access to the internet than non-Indigenous metropolitan households. We know that those in Australia most at risk of digital exclusion are poor, Indigenous, elderly, disabled, or living in rural or remote communities. How do we address digital exclusion? Well, simply let me provide three elements which I think comprise part of the solution. Clearly, access is fundamental. But in addition to access, people must also have the skills and the capabilities to go online and realise the benefits of being online. And in addition to access and capability, we also have to ensure people are safe and protected while they're online. To conclude, the digital economy presents genuinely remarkable opportunities for social inclusion, business development, service delivery, creative expression, innovation, collaboration and employment. We just simply shouldn't forget, though, that technology and socio-economic disadvantage are now inextricably linked. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'd now like to introduce Mark Laurie from PwC. PwC is the other active partner in the Foundation's digital economy work alongside Telstra. And as a partner of the firm and as the India practice leader, Mark brings, I think, great insight into the changing dynamic within our immediate region in particular. And I'd welcome him now to share his views. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, let me start with a hypothesis, and I'll do that by paraphrasing a famous American anthropologist, Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead said that the traveller who is left home is wiser and gains a knowledge of the other culture that should sharpen our ability to scrutinise and to appreciate our own culture. When we're talking about connecting and integrating with Asia, learning about each other's cultures, I think, is fundamental because it also helps us to learn about our own. And as we talk of the Asian century, it is important for us to comprehend what is happening on the ground overseas, so as that we can adapt and change our models to better connect and integrate. Now, the scale and pace of Asia's transformation is unprecedented, and the implications for Australia are profound. I won't go into the numbers again because we've heard them time and time again. But for the Asian century to succeed, it assumes that Asian economies can maintain their momentum over the next 40 years and adapt to the shifts in technology and the shifts in the global economic environment by continually recreating their competitive advantages. And that equally applies to us. And in fact, to enable this, what we found in our survey of APEC CEOs is that some 63% of CEOs said that elimination of trade barriers and the creation of free trade agreements is fundamental and is crucial for the continued economic development on the back of Asia's rise in trade, investment and resources. Now, what we also see is that as Asia changes from a producer-only economy to producer and consumer markets, this will require deeper capital markets and streamlined supply and distribution channels, and hence a role for us to play. Economically, culturally and behaviourally, Asia is different, and we must approach the market and rethink the way our models are constructed to create, maintain and cement our connections with Asia. So what do we do about this connectivity and integration? As we know, a number of our neighbours to the north and to the west, we need to establish social trust prior to be able to effect or put in place effective communication. And our view, or my view, is that better communication or connectivity is just more than language fluency. Interest in the socio-economic and political life of the other country is paramount, as is an understanding as to the cultural and historical differences that affect the way people function. And this is across all levels of business, government and academia. And how do we do this? This is driven by our mindsets. Our mindset must be a willingness to listen and an openness to understand other views. We've talked about it this morning on a number of occasions where we've talked about schooling in Australia and the decrease in Asian languages since the 1960s. Unfortunately, I was taught Latin, which is not a great help at the moment. We must change the general environment and the general engagement attitudes towards Asia across schooling and across business. And I think fundamental to this is in improving our personal networks across Asia. So how are we and others doing this? Well, key to developing our networks, I go back to Margaret Mead. We must travel. You cannot execute an Asian strategy by sitting in Pitt or Collins Street alone. For example, anyone who's been to Mumbai knows the infrastructural problems that exist there and the time it takes just to get across town. So multiply that by the logistics effort of transporting goods and you can get a much better appreciation of the problems. Secondly, we've again mentioned time and time again this morning, are the strategies to increase people-to-people links via an enhanced international education sector. But I think this is both at a national and at a corporate level, so as to ensure that as companies migrate and there is localisation of talent, then this localisation of talent is also baked into not only the local culture, but also to the culture of the company itself. Finally, digital. Through our conversations, we find many CEOs are investing resources to better connect employees through technologies such as the cloud computing and mobility of technology. But again, as Tim just mentioned, we must identify and understand the concepts, limitations and opportunities of this, especially around what we call digital inclusion, and then how the digital economy can maximise productivity and participation both here and in Asia. And whilst digital is part of the solution, I don't think it is the solution, because whilst social networking cuts the costs of networking, how deep are those relationships? For those of you who've got a 14-year-old daughter with a Facebook account, you know what I mean. So we need to move on and bring on real change, and in that regard, I'm pleased that my firm, PwC, is working with the Global Foundation on this issue of digital change. And so what happens in the long term? Well, as one pundit once said, in the long term, we're all dead. So what we must do is to make a positive contribution between now and then so as to leave a lasting legacy for the next generation in the Asian century. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark.